So thank you, everyone. Thank you also to Peter and Roberto for the introduction as well as the invitation. It's my pleasure to share some of my practices and also my reflection onto the topic of multimodal mapping. Although actually most of the time when I work on my research and artistic project, I didn't actually think in this way. So it's actually a very good exercise to look back to your own practice and your own work from a different lens. So I give my talk a title, The Aesthetic of Hybrid Imagery, because many of my works involve visual production, that's why imagery. And I also found that in the context of multimodal mapping, it makes sense to not to just map data or transit information from one to another form, but also to integrate and allow the signal or information to transform together. So also the notion of hybridization here, I would say, and also when I pick, my projects, I consolidate three aspects of hybridization. It could be digital versus analog, no matter it is the type of information or the art form, art practice, and also deterministic versus stochastic, because sampling and things like that to extract information, it could have different approach, and also material and physical, virtual or reality, because in this often opposing but complementary ideas, when they come together, it usually brings a layer of complexity and not necessarily randomness or noise, but a lot of, in my experience, a lot of surprise and also poetic experience and expression and uniqueness too. So I'm going to share three of my projects. So when I say project, it is not just a project, but it might be a body of work under a methodology that I developed together sometimes with my PhD students and research associates. The first project that I call is computational light painting. So for those who are not familiar with the term light painting, it is the practice of, you can hold a point light source like your flashlight on your cell phone or even a candle, and you move in the space and allow a slow shutter camera to capture the movement of the light source. So then all the gesture and the position of the light source will be added together and collected by one single image. So in this particular picture, Picasso was invited to do an experiment conducted by a photographer, John Milley, and in three particular moments, so the environment was darkened, but at three particular moments, the environment was, lightened so that we can see more clearly three different posture of the artist when he was drawing the figure. So everyone does that nowadays. So when you think about what if we not just do it with a freehand stroke, but more in a controlled manner, And what if it is not just a point light source, for example, an array of light bulb or LED that can individually switch on and off, like, no, not that one yet, but yeah, another example was, of course, connecting the point light source to the end of the bow of violinist Heifetz, capturing his bow's trace while he was playing the violin. So what I meant by an array of light source, and when you carry the array of light source, and it does not only capture your movement, because it sweeps a random surface, and when you do the long exposure, you can also create an imagery of more representational image. So in this case, and also academia, Canadian-based inventor Steve Mann, many years ago in 1974, he created this very interesting device to visualize some invisible signal, and in this case, it was radio frequency. So what then if I am not using, just an array of light, but a flat surface, for example, an iPad or my cell phone or even a projection as the light source, then I can actually sweep the flat display in the mid-air so as to create a long exposure of three-dimensional pattern like this, okay? So basically, the idea is very much like 3D printing, right? You can first have a 3D model and then simulate the ping pattern, and then you slice the 3D model, and then you render the contour of the object at different time element that is tightly synchronized with the posture, the position, and the orientation of the display. Then you can obtain a, rather than abstract but representational 3D pattern in the context of light painting. Okay, so I call this practice as computational light painting, because if you can precisely acquire the relative pose of the light source, in this case the display, and the camera, because you can place it in arbitrary position, but once you calibrate them, you can get the 6 degrees of freedom pose, the relative pose of these two elements. And then in another configuration, if I am not to put the camera still, but mount the camera onto the robot arm, having the display, or it can be a projection or other forms of display that I can change the content as the light source. So if we think about these two different, so this is called the computational kinetic photography. Kinetic photography is also a photographic practice where people may keep their shutter open, they may throw their camera in the mid-air, allow the movement of the camera to capture the environment, light traces in the picture. But in a computational approach, because I can again, get the relative position and orientation of the camera and the display, I can actually produce the same effect. So then In reality, these two configurations are due to each other mathematically. So in one of the experiments that I did, I used the visual of the Visible Human project, where there were donors and their body, after they were dead, their corpses were sliced into thin slice and captured in high resolution image. So this video, if you drag it in space and capture long exposure, you will expect to obtain something rather than just the silhouette, but also the internal data. So it's volumetric. And if you are not moving the light source, but moving the camera instead, so this is what I did in the lab. So you can see that because of the motion blur, your camera is moving, right? So the structure, everything is become blur because of the motion blur, but the content, the light pattern is representational. And also what I want to highlight here, of course, if I want to get a very clean and clear visualization of the volumetric data, I do not need to do that. But the interplay of, because I initially have the video, and then I do not just use the digital information to render, the 3D data, but allow the light and the movement of the robot and then the camera to play the role, making things more interesting because it is performance. And also the sampling, because you bring the light to the physical environment. And then, although I'm using a digital camera, but still it is a sampling process of the, of the photon. And then it was captured by the camera sensors. So there is a transition between digital and physical and virtual and reality. So I think this brings a layer of complexity, and as said here, there were occasions that I can put together this system as a installation setting. One of the occasions was a few years ago. It was the 500th anniversary of Leonardo da Vinci's death, and there were an exhibition at CityU showcasing 12 original drawings of Leonardo da Vinci. It was a privilege of the city. So in many of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, and some that were shown in Hong Kong, was his study of perspective, like geometric shape that were drawn with perspective. Like this. So in that exhibition, when the curator invited us as media artists to develop words to respond to Leonardo da Vinci's practice, so I basically use the computational kinetic photography technique, set up a display, and then to capture in real time. So everything captured was live. The camera was controlled to, turn on the shutter, turn off the shutter, but for a very long period of time. Sometimes it takes 30 seconds, 1 minute, or more than 1 minute, so that all the pattern will be collapsed onto one single image, and then finally the outcome will be displayed on the other projection. So the attempt here is also to create perspective, like to study perspective, but in a very different approach than Leonardo da Vinci. Because, my approach was, of course, I first built the 3D model. Actually, my approach was much easier than Leonardo da Vinci because once you have the accurate 3D model and you slice and because the movement of the camera actually creates the geometric relationship between the instantaneous plane that I'm rendering as a contour as the camera, that would create the perspective. So these are the geometric shape that I have included in this installation that I call impression machine. And in another occasion, I had the chance to consolidate another artistic concept to set up a performative robot installation using the computational kinetic photography technique. Was an exhibition called Art Machine, Past and Present. So it was a work that I worked in collaboration with Kowloon. This thing kind of blocked the text here. A friend of mine, also a former colleague of School of Creative Media. So the work is called disintegration, and I will explain why dis and integration. So it was done actually right at the middle of the social movement. So it is actually a reflection of our emotion and also perhaps the emotional landscape of Hong Kong people during the social movement. So we have picked 20 objects to be expressed and displayed using this system in this installation. So so this time we were not using a TV or secondary projection screen, but on the same projection wall, we both display the contour as well as the resultant image. And the previous, long exposure image would then retain here while we start to light paint the next object. So there will be, if you imagine the process, when when the camera is moving and it starts building up one object because of the movement and also the display of the and also because the first object was retained there, and also because of the motion of the camera, then it brings about motion blur. So the previous object in the next photo will be blurry. That's why we call this artwork as disintegration, because it takes both integration and also disintegration into one single setting. So some of the models that we include in this work were, like in the previous method, we just built the 3D model in software, and also this cone, although the texture was, obtained from a real roll cone. But many of other models that we use in the installation were actually real objects, and we tried to reconstruct the 3D model from a real object. So one of the object was a kind of doctor's mask that I got many years ago when I was traveling in Venice. So what we do is to capture either many photographs from different perspective or a video looking at different side of the object, and then we use photogrammetry to reconstruct the 3D model. However, because especially for this case, if there's no texture, the whole object was white, the photogrammetry doesn't work. And then we had to do some intervention, like to project some additional pattern onto it while we were capturing different perspective of the object, so as to obtain a better quality 3D reconstruction. So this is the result while the camera was strapped by the robot in space. This is a projection screen, and yeah, so the process is actually that slow, but since they want to leave time for the audience to think about what's going on, think about how the photo were captured, how things comes together. A bit too slow. Okay, so the result is like that. So again, we can, of course, just to display the reconstructed 3D model without doing all this setup. But I think that through the process, it creates a sense of wonder because of the movement of the camera and the robot and the light being very abstract, and then after the whole process, it's like a game to guess what the model is at the end. And also, like what I said, the process brings in the stochastic complexity and surprise. So we'll quickly show you what the objects that we have captured, like the statue of the Lady of Justice, and also Lego that to mimic water barrier. And also because when you do photogrammetry, the reflection and the material will give you a lot of like artifacts. The previous case of the doctor mask, that in some case we just allow the artifacts be part of the work, like these holes and the imperfectism that incorporate in the final outcome. And also there are artifacts that were not, maybe not artifacts, but the property or the essence of the outcome, like these additional like patterns due to the slicing of the 3D object during the light painting process. And so this one illustrates that after the current object being captured, the previous object, I actually don't recognize what it is, but become blurry, so it like appeared. So this is one example that involves like many different forms of data, from a physical object, and then we do photogrammetry to obtain the digital model. And the digital model will be compute and simulate and being sliced and displayed in the physical world using the projector, and then the light is being captured by the digital camera, and it becomes, you know, the analog information becomes digital again. So this is what I meant by the hybridization of imagery here. Another project that I want to illustrate this idea is a number of fog display that I have created in the past. So it was actually many years ago, there was a New Vision Art Festival in Hong Kong, and the curator actually invited me to send him a work, but he wanted that work to be a video work. So I'm not a video artist. So I was, and by that time I was very curious about what if I, you know, project something into a immaterial screen, like fog screen, which is essentially a humidifier that will create water droplets that is small enough to suspend in the mid-air. And then because of scattering, and more precisely me scattering, that will then have the projection and the image being created in the air, and we can touch it. And more importantly, in this work, what I want to experiment is whether this kind of bistable optical illusion still be valid display this illusion in the fog. So it is a very famous optical illusion called the spinning dancer. It is called illusion because there is, you know, the silhouette of a dancer spinning is displayed, but there is a lack of depth information, okay? So when the video frames put together, there are two possibilities. One is when the dancer is spinning in clockwise direction when we are looking from the top, or she could be also spinning in an anti-clockwise direction. So many people can draw what we perceive. Some cannot, like me. I always would perceive the dancer spinning in a clockwise direction. So what I submitted to the Vision Art Festival, but later on I further developed this work by adding some small intervention to it, which is a motion sensor. So my attempt was to allow the audience to control what they perceive, okay? So the audience can use their hand to touch the dancer to control whether she will spin in clockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction. So this is what I did. This is the original animation, right? Probably many of you can see dancers spinning in both directions. Okay? It is because there's a lack of depth information. But if you add some very subtle line, okay, to confine individual moment, whether the leg is the left leg or right leg, the arm is left arm or right arm, like in this case, the dancer is always moving in the anti-clockwise direction. And of course, if you do it, another way, you can control the dancer to be spinning in a clockwise direction. And also because the animation was projected in fog, you cannot actually tell, you cannot see the lines at all, because the fog projection is, the good thing or the bad thing is it becomes blurry and it hides the lines so that you can actually do this trick to control the spinning direction of the dancer. So I think fog or mist is also a very good example illustrating, the interplay between digital and analog, or to bring in physicality to computational art. So this is not an art project, but more an engineering attempt to create a volumetric fog display using actually two approaches. One was to use, I can show the visual later. So this one involved a two-dimensional array of fog emitter that can individually switch on so that you can create a non-planar fog screen, and together with projection mapping, you can create content, visual content at different depth level. And of course, when you set up some depth camera or other kinds of sensor, it can do object recognition and also other interaction possibility. Like later on, we have an example of drawing in mid-air. And also, besides setting up the fog, nozzle in a two-dimensional array, we have another prototype that has only 4 fog emitter, but each of them are moved by a stepper motor, a linear motion platform. So again, you can create a non-planar fog screen. And also because it is just mist and it's cold, it's clean, so it actually creates a very interesting interactive possibility. So this is the other prototype that we have developed in the lab. So using fog projection, I have also produced some art pieces. So this one, also in collaboration with Kowloon, was a 2-channel animation where we set up not volumetric one, but 2 flat fog screen in a orthogonal, like 90-degree settings. So why we are doing that? Because we want to explore the narrative strategy of using fog. And in particular, because if you are very off angle, you cannot see the image very clearly because of the property of mere scattering. So that the audience had to stand in front or slightly off angle of one of the two fog screen in order to look at, the content. So everyone, because of different time and different position, they will put together different, sequence and different different version of the story. So although in some moment the two-channel animation were the same, there was a distortion of the video, but anyhow, yeah, but two different perspectives, but in some moment there were two different content, but they were like connecting with each other, that some event would happen. So this was shown in Videotage as I forgot the anniversary. It was 15th, 20th anniversary of Videotage, a video art and media art organization in Hong Kong, and we did a workshop with many creative practitioners and hobbyists in Hong Kong at that time. The video scale is interesting because I cropped the video, so it when it was displayed in another software, then this didn't work. Anyhow, another piece that I did also with the fog screen, I invited a dancer, Fountain, and I capture her movement in two perspectives. And again, I project her, movement, the video in a L-shaped fog screen. And in this time, what I did is not just to display the video, but incorporate some interactivity in it. So I have created a digital fluid system so that the audience can use their hand or other body part to manipulate the visual. And also because the video was projected onto the fog screen, and the fog is a real physical fluid system. So there are actually two fluid systems. One is the virtual one, programmed, and other one is the physical fluid system of the fog. And they will be seeing the interplay between the digital and the physical fluid system that comes together. Finally, the third project that I've picked is actually a very old project, one of my earliest projects that I did in 2011. It was the Microwave Festival that I collaborate with a dancer, Frankie Ho, and also a musician, Kowloon. So you imagine it was 13 years ago. So it was actually also an experiment to try to use different accessories of game console, like the Microsoft Kinect, and also the Wii balance board, and also the Remote control, which is like a joystick, but it is wireless that you can connect to the computer through Bluetooth. And I put the remote at the arms of Frankie, so as to capture her movement. So not exactly lots of comments on how I map the IMU data to the visual or the audio, the sound is also part of the performance. But what I want to talk about is the time element of it, okay? It is because, gesture is of course dynamic and time-based. And like this clock, Frankie, she actually improvised. She didn't, really do a lot of choreography, but she had to interact with herself. That is 4 seconds ago, because I programmed in a way that if I go back to that particular moment, right here, she was by herself, but you see the visual, there were 2 dancers because one of the, shadow was her history. So the time as a variable in this piece is very important. So in conclusion, so I finished all the 3 projects. So in conclusion, what I want to share in my experience of, using different ways of collecting data or expressing visual or other forms or medium is mixing different types of signal will create a very interesting and sometimes fruitful outcome. Yeah. Thank you.